talk to Colonel Simon Diggins now, a military and defence analyst, about where we are with Putin and whether or not we should be preparing for war after he said he doesn't want war with Europe. But if Europe starts the war, Russia is ready right now. And we pretty much know we are not. Colonel Diggins, I must ask you first of all, I'm sure you were able to listen to that conversation I just had with our caller, Andy. You know, does he know a lot more about Russia than the rest of us? And is he right and are we wrong?
Julie, no. Good morning to you. It was extraordinary what Andy sort of came up with. He seemed to basically swallow the Kremlin talking points, hook, line, and sinker. It's really quite straightforward. Putin is an aggressor. Putin's worldview is that the collapse of the Soviet Union was a geostrategic disaster from his position. And what he wants back is essentially all that they had before under the Warsaw Pact. So all those countries to the east, what we call Eastern Europe, basically under Russian dominance and with no independence. Their sovereignty, modified sovereignty is the word he uses, of the Baltics. And that's the kind of world he wants. And Ukraine, which is an independent sovereign country, has stood up to him, and we should be absolutely 100% supporting them in what they're doing. They are defending the West for us.
Is it remotely relevant whether or not the regime in the administration in Ukraine has a level of corruption which, frankly, one would expect from any former Soviet Union nation?
It's not irrelevant, but it's not the main point. I think we should be, because one of the things we want to try and do is encourage them to become closer to the West. And we have, to some extent at least, eliminated some of the corruption within our own country. I think we should be very wary of holding ourselves up as paragons of virtue. But I think, regardless, I think there is an issue with that.
I mean, the EU let Romania in, and Romania is absolutely riddled with corruption from top to bottom.
Yeah, what the eruption of the Soviet Union did into Eastern Europe at the end of the Second World War did, in terms of the internal polities of those countries, was effectively delegitimate them. Yeah. So anything that had come from before was just disappeared. And the only way you got what you wanted was by knowing somebody, the so-called nomenclatura. Yeah. And the nomenclatura, if you knew them, you corrupt them, you bribed them, and you got what you wanted. Yeah. And that, unfortunately, is the legacy which they've left. Yeah. And it's going to take them a long time to change that culture from there. But we must encourage them along. So not irrelevant, but really not the main point.
Well, let's go back to the wider politics of this. I mean, Vladimir Putin, just ahead of this meeting, but after rejecting the 18-point plan the 19-point plan as opposed to the 28-point plan that he put forward, basically is like, complete surrender of Ukraine to all intents and purposes, what he wanted to get a deal on. Europeans push back at that. They've got a meeting in Brussels with foreign affairs ministers. Trying to push their plan. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in the US administration where, what Trump and his ally, Steve Witkoff, want, and what perhaps Marco Rubio and other sane people in the regime want is very, very different. But this comment out of the blue from Vladimir Putin that Russia has no intention of going to war with European countries, but if Europe starts the war, Russia is ready right now. How worried should we be about that?
I think we should always worry about it, because I think Putin has basically backed himself into a corner, having basically become the latest aggressor to try and dominate our continent. He doesn't really have any other tools in his golf bag. And he has promised his cronies and his oligarchy, and we should never forget he has got a sort of constituency of sort, that what he will deliver for them is dominant power in Eastern Europe. Yeah. He's got an economy that basically is now on a wartime basis. He spent 8% of his GDP on military hardware and defence, 40% of all their government expenditure. And the rest of the economy, the civilian bit of the economy, has basically turned, twisted and distorted in order to support his war economy. And the thing is, having created that economy, where else do you go? Yeah. So if he fails in Ukraine, what else is he going to be looking to do? And we know some of the weak point areas. We know Moldova. We know that the Baltics. They're all places where he could probably create some enough chaos or try and identify a kind of say, Russian minorities have been oppressed, or give him the kind of excuse that he actually needs.
Same playbook he used for Croatia, same playbook for the Donbass region as well. This is the worry, Is NATO, I memean, we look at the Baltic states, these are NATO members. Are we going to actually stand up to Putin? Or is he going to do it again, like what he does with this these spy ships with the cables? We'll wait until he cuts the cables before we take any action. Even when he's putting lasers, their ships are putting lasers into the eyes of our pilots, which is clearly an act of hostility against us, just outside our own, sea territory. Are we just going to wait until there's, a Russian flag planted in the middle of Tallinn before we actually go, oh yeah, they've invaded? Because he doesn't do these things largely in a very blatant way. The first few years will be stealthy. I mean, are we going to basically live up to our commitments under Article 5 of our NATO treaty?
I mean, that's what he's going to test us on. And of course, what he's trying to do the whole time is blur that line between peace and war, and that's what he's trying to do. Are we going to live up to it? I really hope we do, but if we are going to live up to it, we actually need to start working on it seriously now, and we're not. I mean, we know there's been some discussion with the chiefs. They threw the civil servants out there, and they were going to write to the Prime Minister and say, they expected what they expected from the budget. When I heard that they were going to increase taxes, I thought, well, maybe, just maybe, we're actually going to live up to our defence expenditure, and I would sign up for my taxes being used to do that. But we appear to be at the moment still in this place of maximum rhetoric. The latest review, the strategic review, was very clear about the threat that Russia faced, and yet we're not doing enough about it, particularly in the timelines that we actually need. So we've backed ourselves into the worst of all possible places. Whereas, as you say, using a kind of, if you like, the war rheostat, Putin can turn the heat up, turn the heat down, and a bit like the old boiled frog, we won't actually know if we're actually dying or not.
That's
our challenge.
That is the real worry. I mean, again, when people say, look, we don't want war, and Caller earlier Faye says, I've got 2 sons, I've got a daughter. Claire Pissell, the guest in the studio today, she has a son as well. Our children are likely to be of the age in the next few years when they would be likely to be called up in the event of war. No one wants war, but least of all, actually, people like you who've actually been to war. But what's the best way of avoiding a war?
Preparation. If you want to avoid war, you prepare for it. Look at how the Finns are working. The Finns can mobilise 900,000 people, and this is a population of less than 10 million.
We have 70 million. We can mobilise what?
110 if you're on a good day. I mean, it's. I don't think actually.
Well, when they're not all off sick.
Yeah, well, they're a bit more robust than that. But I mean, what we don't have is a kind of a country that's organised for defence in order to make it effectively to prevent a war, and that's what the Finns have done. It's what the Baltics are trying to do. It's what we need to do, and we need to find a way to do it. And what's really interesting about those countries, even including interesting in Germany, is how they absolutely support what's going on. The approval ratings for the idea of conscription and everything that goes there is there because not just because they're close to Russia and they know what Russia does to them, but because their governments have taken the time and effort to explain the challenge, explain why it's necessary. We have not had that. There's been a bit of elite discourse around the Russian threat, but there's the absolute sense that we are a nation whose interests, whose long-term future is being threatened by a European aggressor, not for the first time in our history, but it's been threatened again, really has not sunk through, and it's just so disappointing.